We're from J.C. Green's. We have a location in Thomasville and also the Walberg community in the northern part of the county. What we're going to do today is just kind of talk to y'all about kind of the history of funeral services, some of the different options we offer to families, and then other ways to pre-plan and pre-pay for a funeral. So I have a slideshow here, and what we'll do is kind of zip through this fairly quickly. That way we can answer any questions you guys might have. But just to get started, we'll talk a little bit about histories of funerals. So basically, funerals have been around for a long, long time. Up until the 1900s, a lot of funerals were handled by the family, maybe handled in the family's home. Up until the late 1800s, kind of folks started getting involved in it. We as a funeral home, we've been around since 1895, and we're the oldest family-owned business in Davidson County. Essentially, how it started was Robert, his grandfather, J.C. Green, started it as a furniture company and said, hey, I'm building caskets for folks, and this might be a business we could get into. So, and this kind of speaks on the history of our business. So we started in 1895 in Thomasville, J.C. Green. It was a furniture company and an undertaking company. Mr. Green was the first licensed embalmer in Davidson County. In 1932, he moved the business into his personal home, just with the Depression going on and so forth. Just felt like it was better suited to just operate in his home, which is our current location on Main Street. We've been serving this community for 4 generations and over 125 years. And in 2000, we opened up our second location, which serves the northern part of the county. So, service options. So when someone passes away, there's different avenues you can choose to go down. You could have a traditional service where we might go to a church, we might do something in our chapel. You could do a visitation where there's a viewing the night before. You could do it prior to the service. Some folks choose to say, hey, let's just do everything out at the cemetery. Let's have a graveside service where we can kind of enjoy the outdoors. And then, of course, you can have visitations and so forth before a graveside service. You could have it the night before. Or you could do what's called just immediate burial. Just say, hey, really don't want to have any services. We just want to, have a burial and handle it that way. Some folks choose to maybe donate their body to a medical school where, future doctors can study and work on the person to gain knowledge. So that's something we offer as well. And a lot of the ones we do here go to Wake Forest in Winston. They have a medical school. Services kind of continued. Cremation. Cremation has become a popular kind of alternative to burial in recent years. We as a funeral home, we offer cremation. A lot of families might choose to have a cremation with a memorial service. A memorial service just means the body isn't present. It could be anywhere. It could be in our chapel. It could be at a church. It could be at someone's home. It's just a gathering of folks without the body being present. Some families might have a gathering of friends, kind of like a visitation, just not as formal, where you come and spend a couple hours and kind of share memories. And then something that's kind of becoming more popular is to have a traditional funeral where you have a viewing, you have a casket, you have essentially everything a traditional funeral would have. The only difference is instead of going to a cemetery afterwards, you do a cremation afterwards. So that's kind of a blend of a traditional service and a cremation. That's kind of become more popular than some folks just come to us and say, hey, I don't want any viewing, I don't want any services, just simply want to have a cremation, and that's called a direct cremation. So what impacts cost? So as you may know, funerals have kind of increased over the years, and really some of the big impacts of that is maybe what merchandise you selected. So if you selected maybe more of an expensive casket or an expensive vault, services selected. So if you had a full traditional service where you have a visitation, you have a service, you have a limousine, you have all the bells and whistles. So there's ways to kind of cut costs. General operating expenses, so utilities, power bill, light bill, water. I mean, there's utilities that go involved into running a business. Vehicles, we strive to have very nice vehicles, but that also comes with really high expenses. Taxes and just other general operating costs. Then there's staffing. We value our staff. We have a really good staff. So that does impact the cost of things. Having a full, I think we have, 15 full-time folks and another 15 part-time. So it's a business that operates every day of the year, night and day. So it requires a lot of help. And then, other impacts, whether someone chooses have embalming, which helps kind of preserve the body for viewing, that impacts cost, and then use of facilities. And then something we're all feeling, inflation. Our vendors where we get things from, I mean, every year, 5%, 10%. It's just unreal the expense that's passed on to us as a business that we try to absorb, but inflation's a big cause for that. Average cost of a funeral. So I got these figures offline. I feel like these figures are fairly accurate for Davidson County, especially the surrounding areas. So a traditional service in North Carolina is roughly around $7,800. Cremation in North Carolina is roughly around $1,900. And then a traditional service with a cremation kind of at the end as the disposition, maybe around $5,800. And I would say most of the funeral homes in our area, that would hold true. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of a number, a figure you might have in mind. Now keep in mind, this is a funeral home. This isn't a cemetery. So cemeteries and folks like that, they have expenses as well. So I'll kind of turn it over to my dad, Robert. He's going to speak on the benefits of pre-planning and then talk about some different options.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I'll just begin by using my wife and I as an example. I spend probably the majority of my time talking to people about pre-planning. That is something that I think is very meaningful to me as a funeral director to do, to help people pre-plan. And about 2 years ago, I told my wife, I said, well, I'm spending all this time talking to people and we haven't done it. So my wife and I pre-planned and prepaid our funeral. We have 5 children, and we wanted to be sure that not only did we have things done the way we wanted it, but that then the kids would say, well, this is what Mom wanted, this is what Dad wanted. There would be no disagreement. We took it to a pretty high level. We not only prepaid the funeral expenses, but we went ahead and prepaid the cost of opening and closing the grave when we did pre-arrangements. We actually set money aside in the pre-arrangement for an obituary in the paper, we set aside money for flowers, we set aside money for an honorarium to the minister. So in essence, at our death, no one will owe anything. You know, it will all be paid out of these prearrangements. And when someone chooses to prepay their funeral, the funeral home is not allowed to put that money in their pocket or in their operating budget. We have to put that money off in a pre-need trust. And so that money just sits there and earns a little interest. And as a funeral home, we hope that that money earns enough interest to keep up with inflation. Quite honestly, these days it really doesn't. But the guarantee that we make to people when they prepay their funeral is that it is inflation proof. In other words, everything that you have paid for today, no matter how much it goes up in the future, we're not going to ask for any more money when that death occurs. And this money is put, as I say, into a pre-need trust where it is irrevocable. And irrevocable means that the funeral home can't touch that money. The family, your family can't touch that money, but most importantly, the government can't touch that money. It can never be counted against you as an asset. If you ever go through the process of maybe trying to sign up for Medicaid, they take an inventory of your assets. They'll want to know your bank accounts. They'll ask about different things. One of the questions that they ask is, have you prepaid for your final expenses? And if you say you have, they'll just want to simply see a copy of your pre-need contract. And they don't care if you have spent $10,000 on a funeral or if you've spent $1,500 to be cremated. What they want to see when they're looking for that paperwork, they're wanting to see this one blank that you have initialed that makes this irrevocable. That tells them that this is money that you can't touch as an asset. If you're talking with them and if they ask you if you have prepaid your funeral and you say no, generally they'll suggest, especially if they know maybe you have a little bit of assets, they'll suggest you go ahead and do it. Maybe there's a situation where people are having to spend down assets a little bit before they qualify for Medicare. They'll suggest you do that. But you know, it's a wonderful gift to your family to be able to put your wishes down on paper. And we see a lot of people that will put a lot of biographical information down on paper. I guess back in 1989, I experienced the death of the first of my two parents, and it was a sudden death. And even though Dad and I were in the funeral service, we were just completely blank. I found my mom on the bathroom floor, and my mind was blank. Dad's mind was blank. A day before, we could have told people all this information, just information to prepare a death certificate. But it was very difficult for us to even think about these things. Mom had never really put anything down on paper, and a lot of people don't, but that told me we need to put things down on paper. So when it's my time, it's going to be a lot easier for Mark and his siblings, because I have all this down on paper, and all they have to do is just say, this is the time we want Dad's service. But I just view it as a true gift to your family to do it. Now some people, say, well, I just don't really care about prepaying my funeral. But can I come in and talk to you and put things down on paper? And the answer to that is absolutely. You're welcome to. Nobody's twisting your arm to prepay. We think it's a good thing for the family or for the consumer. But just getting your wishes down on paper is probably the primary thing that I think all of us should do.
Just some ways to fund a prearrangement. If you're able, you can pay up front, kind of like Robert was speaking. We offer payment plans. Let's say if you want just a monthly payment that's affordable for you, you can do it over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. when you do it that way, there's a form of insurance that's built into that. So let's say you chose a 5-year payment. After, is it 2 years?
Yes.
So after 2 years, let's say in that 3rd year, a death occurred, your funeral would be fully funded. So there's a form of insurance that's built into pre-arranging that is beneficial. So that's something you could do. Some folks might already have life insurance and say, hey, I have a policy that we took out 20 years ago. I've intended for that to be what covers expenses when my time comes. That's perfectly fine. You could come in and make the funeral home beneficiary of that policy, or you could, make sure whoever's going to handle affairs for you has a copy of that and bring that in when the death does occur. And then we can file that and do what's called an insurance assignment that says, hey, let's say a funeral was $8,000. They would assign the funeral home the money, and then the difference would go to that beneficiary. So we have folks do that a lot. And then kind of like what Dad was saying, a wishes file. It's no payment, but merely gathering information. We store that information here at the funeral home. That way, if something did happen, when your family calls us, hey, we pull the file, everything that we might need to know, any wishes, any information pertaining to filing with Social Security, filing with the county, doing the death certificate, we already have that information. Some of the handouts I gave y'all is really beneficial. You could just go through it one day and say, hey, I'm going to jot this information down and make sure the person who will kind of help when my death occurs has this. It makes it tremendously easier. It's just like what Dad was saying when my grandmother passed. Even though they're in this business, having to face that and the emotions that were over you, as simple as where was my mom born? So it's really beneficial for information kind of in those handouts that you have that written down at a minimum for your family to have.
I've been with them for about a year and a half almost, or so, close to a year and a half. And I do home care. Everybody gets a social worker on their services without going into all the detail about hospice, because that's not exactly what we're here to talk about. But I'm grateful for the work I get to do and very humbled by that on a daily basis. So just to throw that in. But we're going to talk about advanced directives. Some of you might be wondering, what is that? You might have some, or you might not have even heard about it. So they are tools to help you and your loved ones think through and communicate your personal healthcare decisions, values, and preferences. It's written statements of your wishes and preferences regarding end-of-life healthcare decisions. It's only used when you are no longer able to speak for yourself. So sometimes people get nervous about these because they think that once they complete one, it means that whoever they have named is now able to step in and start making those decisions and choices. But if you're able to speak and you can mentally understand what's going on, then we're looking at you, whoever your healthcare provider is. So why bother? Advanced directives are important because we all face end-of-life circumstances. They provide a clear-cut legal way to establish an individual's wishes. And they also give you peace of mind to your loved ones, yourself, and who will be present when difficult decisions need to be made. They allow you to decide not only what you do want, but what you do not want. There are different types of advanced directives. The first is healthcare power of attorney. You'll see it abbreviated for HCPOA. The next is a living will. Then there's a do not resuscitate order, and a most order, medical orders for scope of treatment, and 5 wishes. And we'll talk about those kind of as we go along. The most common ones that we see within the work that we do on a daily basis is probably the top 3. And the living will is not the same thing as a will. So the healthcare power of attorney is a legal form designating who you want to make decisions for you only when you are deemed unable. It's imperative to have conversations with your designee or whoever you name regarding your wishes. You are able to appoint a secondary in the case that something happens to the first person that you name. It must be signed in front of 2 witnesses and a notary public. And I brought one. In case anybody wanted to do it, I thought that might be a good idea. And yeah, you can name 2 people. Oh, another thing about it is in case like someone didn't do it today, it has to, the 2 people that are witnesses, they cannot be related to you by blood or marriage. It could be a neighbor or anyone else. It's not blood or marriage. A living will. So this is a legal document that provides space for a person to instruct their healthcare designee and medical team on what to do at end of life. It allows for direction on like dialysis, ventilator, artificial nutrition and hydration, comfort care, body and organ donation preferences, and this also must be signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary public. And that is why it's very different than a will, because this has nothing to do with your assets or any of that stuff. This is only about your health care. The do not resuscitate order, the big golden rod paper, some people call it the golden rod, golden ticket, I've heard it called that before. It's a medical order signed by a physician stating that if a person's breathing or heart stops, that they do not want to be resuscitated. The DNR is one of the 2 advanced directives that are accepted by emergency personnel. If you have one, usually we tell people to put it away or put it up where it's easily accessible or visible in the home, but some people don't want to look at that on a daily basis, so we'll tell them to put it in their packet or just somewhere where you can get to it quick. Because if you did have it, then obviously you don't want those chest compressions, and so if something happens in an emergency, the first thing you're thinking about is probably not grabbing that form either. Medical order for scope of treatment, the MOST form. It's a pink form, and I'll show it on the next slide. It's also a legal form describing a person's wishes when they are facing life-threatening medical conditions. It's bright pink, and it must be signed by a physician. And if I didn't say it about the DNR, that also has to be signed by a physician too. Those 2 come from your provider. It is also acknowledged by emergency medical personnel, and it covers preferences for things like CPR, different levels of medical interventions, antibiotics, and artificial fluids and nutrition. And this one, for some reason, well, there is a reason, a good one. We don't see this one as much with the work that we do because a lot of times by the time that someone has elected comfort care, they're not going to treatment anymore. That's not their goal anymore. Comfort is. And that's the MOST form. Pink. I did bring these because I felt like if you can't get them from us and you have to get it from your provider, there would be no point in me bringing it because you need to talk to your doctor about it. Or your PCP, whoever that is. The 5 wishes is the legal form as well that speaks to a person's medical, spiritual, personal, and emotional wishes. It's designed to assist with navigating difficult conversations with family and loved ones, and it covers who you want to make decisions about your personal health care wishes, your comfort goals, how you want to be treated, and your wishes for your loved ones. And you can find that information on 5wishes.com. So, who needs advanced directives? Everybody. All of us. People like me, healthy people, older people, young people. You never know what's going to happen. Like when I leave this room, I don't have any idea. And I want my loved ones to know what my wishes are, what I don't want, the type of treatment that I want, that kind of thing. And what I want right now will probably be a lot different than what I want in probably 50 years from now. So how do you complete them? The Healthcare Power of Attorney can be downloaded on the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, NHPCO, website by clicking on your state and on North Carolina Legal Aid website. The Living Will completion information can also be found on NC Legal Aid website. As I mentioned, the DNR and the MOST form can be obtained by asking your healthcare provider. 5 Wishes is online at 5wishes.org. And then once you complete these forms, if you wanted to be extra type A personality, you could upload those into the NC database on secretary.nc.state.us, or give them to whoever your medical provider is, and they'll keep a copy on file too. So common questions Advanced directives can be revised at any time. A new form will need to be completed and/or witnessed and then notarized, and the old needs to be destroyed. So you can, it's not permanent, you can change it, what you want today, you know, life changes, so I might change it. You might be in a relationship with someone, maybe you're not married, and then you two have snapped. And then you no longer want them to be the one, and so you're gonna change it up or something, who knows? You don't need an attorney to complete any of the things that we've talked about, any advanced directives. That's something that people get tripped up on sometimes, but then there's a preference. Some people just feel comfortable having an attorney do that for them. But you don't have to have it, and they are free to complete. So